In late 2013, bank security cameras in Ukraine captured some truly unbelievable footage. One of their ATM machines appeared to be dispensing cash at random, even though no one had inserted a bank card or even touched a single button. As passerbys eagerly scooped up piles of cash, the banks scrambled to find out what the heck was going on. Soon they would find out that an errant ATM was the least of their problems. They had fallen victim to one of the biggest cyber attacks in history. Hackers had been working behind the scenes for years, and they'd stolen $850 million online. As soon as the Ukrainian bank became aware of their ATM's bizarre behavior, they enlisted the help of Russian cybersecurity firm Kaspersky Labs to get to the bottom of this costly and embarrassing problem. Kaspersky's expert technicians went to work, and they soon discovered that the ATMs were not just malfunctioning, they had been hacked and rigged to spit out large amounts of cash at randomly chosen times. They quickly realized that they were dealing with something much bigger than a few errant ATMs. They had stumbled upon one of the most sophisticated and largest cybercrimes in history, and the ATMs were just the tip of the iceberg. The diligent technicians were able to determine that a group of extremely skilled professional hackers were behind these astonishing attacks. The attacks didn't appear to be the work of any one country or nation-state. Rather, the experts determined that a tightly knit and highly sophisticated ring of cybercriminals from Russia, China, and everywhere were to blame for the unruly ATMs and many more attacks besides. The group, dubbed the Carbanak Cyber Gang after the malicious software they used in their attacks, had stolen more than $850 million from hundreds of banks all over the world. As technicians continued their investigation, they came to realize that these attacks had been going on for years and that the group had targeted countless banks in countries all over the world. In fact, the attacks continued even as Kaspersky Labs technicians were uncovering more and more evidence of the hackers' activities. As they uncovered the details of the hackers' crimes, the group continued to steal thousands of dollars a day from the world's banks. Part of the reason the hackers were able to successfully rob so many banks for years without raising suspicion is that they employed multiple different strategies in their thefts, making it hard to link their various raids back to a single source. The Carbanak Cyber Gang had three major strategies for robbing the unsuspecting banks. The first, of course, was the rigged ATMs. The cyber gangsters were able to remotely hack into the bank's ATM networks, and from hundreds of miles away they could rig the machines to randomly dispense cash. The hackers could arrange for specific machines to spit out piles of cash without requiring a bank card to be inserted or any buttons to be pressed. All the hackers would have to do is station someone nearby to scoop up their haul, and they could walk away with thousands of dollars. And since passersby often got in on the fun, the hackers were able to take their cash and disappear into the crowd, allowing them to get away unnoticed. While rigged ATMs were a convenient way for hackers to access their hordes of stolen cash, it was also a highly visible and suspicious tactic, and they frequently had to battle against bystanders for their take. The hackers had other more advanced tricks up their sleeves though. A more advanced tactic involved gaining access to the accounts of the bank's clients and using them to funnel stolen funds into the hands of the hackers. Once the hackers had infiltrated the bank's network, they would implement a scheme that involved significantly inflating the balance of a client's account before transferring the excess funds into their own accounts. For example, a client's account might have an initial balance of $1,000 before the hackers got a hold of it and inflated the balance to $10,000. The hackers would then transfer $9,000 to their own accounts. The client would be none the wiser, since their balance would appear to have remained unchanged. Inflating accounts was an easy way for the hackers to make off with tens of thousands of dollars for just a few hours' work, but they had their eyes on even bigger targets. The biggest sums of money were stolen in the boldest and most sophisticated online raids. Once the hackers had gained access to the bank's internal network, they were able to do much more than simply alter bank account balances. With unfettered access to the bank's internal workings, the hackers were able to initiate huge cash transfers from the bank's accounts into their own accounts using the bank's internal cash transfer system. Using the bank's own accounts meant they didn't have to worry about transfer limits or large transaction alerts on personal accounts. Instead, they were often able to make off with millions of dollars from a single raid, and by the time the banks noticed what happened, the hackers were long gone, enjoying their spoils hundreds of miles away. These strategies were incredibly lucrative for the hackers. Losses per bank ranged from between $2.5 million on the low end up to $10 million or more for some of the hardest hit institutions. One bank reported that $10 million was stolen during a single raid of their online platform, while another bank lost $7.3 million through the gang's ATM scheme. Altogether, the Carbanak Cyber Gang is thought to have stolen upwards of €1 billion from the world's financial institutions. Rigging ATMs and funneling thousands of dollars through client accounts is one thing, but stealing tens of millions from the bank's own accounts is quite another. How on earth did the hackers get away with such audacious crimes? Part of it has to do with geography. Over a 2-year period, the hackers raided more than 100 different banks in 30 different countries around the world, making it nearly impossible to link the attacks to a single group and allowing the hackers to stay one step ahead of the banks and the authorities. Most of the targeted banks were located in Russia, Ukraine, and China, although the hackers also hit banks in the US, Germany, and countless other countries. Stolen funds were funneled into fraudulent destination accounts that were also hidden all over the world. Much of the stolen money ended up in accounts in the US, China, and Russia. Another reason the hackers were able to get away with their schemes for so long is that they targeted the banks themselves, not the bank's clients. Had the hackers been stealing directly from customer accounts, the clients would have been quick to notice and raise the alarm, and the banks would have had no choice but to investigate and publicly acknowledge the theft. By targeting the bank's own internal accounts instead, the embarrassed banks were eager to keep the details of their thefts under wraps, which made it unlikely that they would connect their own robbery to raids at other banks and harder for investigators to immediately realize the true size and scope of these attacks. While targeting the banks themselves and hitting targets all over the world certainly helped the hackers keep a low profile, their best weapon was their incredible patience. According to Chris Doggett, Kaspersky Labs' North American managing director, most cybercriminals simply smash their way into a system, take whatever they can grab quickly, and run before they get caught. The Carbon X cyber gang, on the other hand, was much more Ocean's 11 than Bonnie and Clyde. As Doggett put it, it would often take the hackers between 2 and 4 months to complete a single raid, and their process was highly sophisticated. Kaspersky Labs' Doggett notes that Carbon X raids were particularly worrisome for banks because it didn't matter what software the banks used. The hackers could find a way in. Even the most advanced proprietary software proved no match for the hackers, who were using a rather simple method for gaining access to the bank's internal networks: good old-fashioned phishing emails. Phishing is one of the oldest forms of cyber attacks, dating back to the 1990s, and it still is one of the most widespread cybersecurity threats. Americans alone lose $57 million a year to phishing scams. A phishing attack is a cyber attack that uses email as a weapon to trick recipients into downloading an attachment that contains a virus or malware. What the Carbon X cyber gang was doing was a sophisticated version of phishing known as spear phishing. Great care was taken to craft legitimate-looking fake emails that would appear to have come from a colleague within the bank and fool the unsuspecting recipient into a false sense of security. Once they'd clicked the link and the malicious Carbon X software was unleashed in the bank's network, it would be nearly impossible to find and contain it. The sophisticated software was able to operate independently, making its way through the bank's internal networks, infecting computer after computer until it found its true target: the computers of employees responsible for the bank's internal accounting and cash transfer systems. This is where the hackers' extreme patience really paid off. Once they had gained access to their target's computers, the hackers would then spend weeks and even months spying on the bank's employees and gathering intel about the bank's operations and routines before they ever stole a single dollar. The Carbon X malware allowed the hackers to gain access to the bank's security cameras and computer webcams, and even log the employees' keystrokes and steal their passwords. This wealth of information made it possible for the hackers to closely watch the bank's employees perform internal transactions, which they could then mimic perfectly from their remote locations. Only after months of spying and reviewing countless images of videos of the bank's operations did the hackers infiltrate the system to complete their own transactions. No doubt the banks would notice the missing money in short order, but by mirroring internal procedures exactly, the hackers made the theft look like an accounting error or an inside job. By the time the banks realized that they'd been attacked, the hackers would have moved on to their next target. The stolen funds would then be withdrawn using the rigged ATMs, transferred to fraudulent accounts in other countries, or laundered using cryptocurrency or prepaid credit cards to hide the source of the funds and make it nearly impossible to trace the money back to the hackers. The hackers would then use the laundered money to purchase luxury goods like cars and even homes, adding another layer of deception and making it still harder to trace the funds. According to Europol, the Carbon X cyber gang has been behind the theft of more than €1 billion since they started their attacks. The majority of the funds were taken from financial institutions, but in 2017 the hackers changed tactics and began targeting the hospitality industry too, stealing millions from restaurants and retail organizations and even infecting point-of-sale systems. This change in strategy might have spelled the beginning of the end for the Carbon X cyber gang though. In March 2018, Europol announced that they'd arrested one of the alleged masterminds behind the Carbon X cyber gang. The man, identified only as Denis K., was a Ukrainian national who was arrested in Spain. The case is still pending, but Europol credits this high-profile arrest to strong collaboration and cooperation between international law enforcement agencies. Even the arrest of one of their leaders hasn't seemed to slow down the Carbanak cyber gang. They continue to raid financial institutions and other businesses, stealing tens of millions of dollars annually from banks and companies around the world. Their tactics continue to evolve and grow more sophisticated, and they've even inspired a string of copycat cyber gangs who are using similar strategies and software to facilitate their own daring cyber raids. The arrest of Dennis K might have been a big win for law enforcement, but the fight against cyber gangs is far from over. If you thought this video was fascinating, be sure to check out our other videos, like this video called Cyber Wars the US Military is Fighting Right Now, or perhaps you'll like this other video. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.